Emma stood in the middle of her small apartment as evening light slipped through the blinds, turning the walls soft gold and then gray, and the open closet in front of her felt less like a place for clothes and more like a quiet reminder of everything she had lost and not yet found. Dresses hung neatly, blouses folded with care, shoes lined up like they were waiting for permission to be chosen, but none of it felt right, not because the clothes were bad, but because she no longer knew who she was dressing for. A year ago, she would have known. A year ago, she lived in Chicago, shared a life, shared plans, shared simple moments that felt permanent until they weren't, and when that relationship ended, it did not explode or shatter loudly, it simply faded, leaving behind a silence that followed her all the way to Seattle, where she told herself she was starting fresh. Tonight was supposed to be simple, just a small gathering at a neighborhood art cafe, an event meant to help locals connect, nothing romantic, nothing serious, yet her heart felt heavy as if it carried expectations she didn't remember agreeing to. She pulled a blue dress from the hanger, held it against herself, and shook her head because it reminded her of someone she used to be. Then she tried a soft gray sweater, but that felt like hiding, and with each choice she rejected, frustration grew, not loud but steady, until she sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the floor, wondering how something as small as getting dressed had become so hard. It wasn't about impressing anyone, she told herself, but deep down she knew she missed feeling seen, missed the quiet comfort of knowing that someone looked at her and understood her without explanation. The city outside hummed with distant traffic, people moving forward with purpose, and Emma felt stuck between who she was and who she was supposed to become next. She stood again, took a breath, and chose something simple, a soft sweater and dark jeans, telling herself that being comfortable was enough, that she did not need to prove anything to anyone, yet doubt followed her as she checked the mirror one last time inside. She turned away from the reflection and walked toward the kitchen to grab her bag, thinking about how she almost canceled the evening altogether, how loneliness sometimes felt easier than trying, when the sudden sound of the doorbell cut through the quiet apartment. Emma stopped mid-step, her heart jumping in surprise, because she was not expecting anyone, and for a brief moment she considered pretending she wasn't home, but something about the timing made her pause, as if the night itself had interrupted her thoughts on purpose. She smoothed her sweater without thinking, adjusted her hair, and walked slowly to the door, each step carrying a strange mix of nerves and curiosity, emotions she hadn't felt together in a long time. When she reached the door, she rested her hand on the handle and hesitated, not because she feared what was outside, but because she sensed that opening it might mean more than she was ready for, that small moments sometimes led to bigger changes, and she had grown careful since being hurt. Still, she opened the door, and the cool air from the hallway met her face, waking her senses, and standing there was a man holding a small paper bag, looking slightly unsure but kind, like someone who didn't want to intrude. He introduced himself politely, explaining he was delivering a pastry order from the cafe, and Emma realized with a soft laugh that she had completely forgotten about it, her mind so tangled that even simple plans slipped away. As she took the bag from him, their fingers touched briefly, nothing dramatic, nothing inappropriate, yet the moment stayed with her longer than it should have, like a note held just a second too long in a song. The man smiled in a way that felt genuine, not practiced, and asked casually if she was heading out for the evening, and Emma answered honestly that she was, though she wasn't sure why it felt important. He nodded as if he understood, as if he too knew what it meant to step into the night carrying invisible weight, and for a few seconds they stood there, two strangers connected by a pause neither rushed to end. Then he excused himself, wished her a good night, and walked away down the hall, leaving behind a quiet that felt different from before, lighter somehow. Emma closed the door slowly and leaned against it, her heart beating faster, not because anything significant had happened, but because something inside her had shifted, like a door opening in a place she thought was closed. She looked down at what she was wearing and realized, for the first time that evening, that it didn't matter, because the problem had never been the clothes, and as she picked up her bag and prepared to leave, she sensed that the night ahead held more than she expected, and that this simple interruption might be the first step towards something she didn't know she was ready for, but deeply needed. When Emma opened the door, she was met with the sight of Daniel, the man from the cafe delivery. Standing there with a soft smile and a paper bag in his hands, looking slightly apologetic as if he had interrupted something private, yet his presence felt gentle rather than intrusive. He introduced himself again, this time more casually, explaining that he was new to the neighborhood and had been told by a neighbor to make sure the delivery reached her, and Emma felt a strange mix of surprise and curiosity because there was something in his calm demeanor that immediately put her at ease. She noticed small details, the way his jacket fit loosely, the way his hair had a subtle messy charm, the warmth in his brown eyes, and for a moment, she forgot the evening's anxiety, the empty closet, and the uncertainty that had weighed her down, because here was someone who seemed to see her without judgment, someone who carried a presence that felt steady and real. As she accepted the bag from him, their fingers brushed briefly, sending a subtle but unmistakable spark through her, not romantic in a rush, but like a quiet recognition, a connection that lingered beyond the touch itself. Daniel's smile widened, and he asked lightly if she was having a busy night, and Emma laughed softly, telling him it was nothing too serious, just a small gathering at a cafe, yet she noticed how his attention didn't drift, how he seemed genuinely interested without prying, as if he understood that some evenings carried invisible weight. Conversation flowed easily, each word measured but natural, and Emma found herself speaking more freely than she had with anyone in months, sharing small thoughts about moving to Seattle, her new apartment, the quiet struggles of starting over, while Daniel listened without interruption, nodding, responding with kindness, and occasionally teasing lightly, making her laugh in ways that startled her because it felt good to feel light again. As they spoke, she realized that the man who had seemed like a simple delivery person was quietly bridging a gap she hadn't known existed, reminding her of the comfort of human presence and the subtle thrill of being noticed in ways that had nothing to do with outward appearance. They talked about mundane things, the weather, the city, local cafes, but beneath the surface, there was a current of mutual understanding, a sense that both had carried unseen burdens and were meeting in this moment with openness and curiosity. When Daniel finally turned to leave, he lingered a beat, smiling as if he hoped she would remember him beyond the delivery, and Emma, standing in the doorway, felt her heart flutter, aware that this encounter was different, meaningful in its simplicity, as if fate had orchestrated a pause in her ordinary life to offer her something unexpected. Closing the door slowly, she leaned against it, letting the quiet of her apartment sink in, yet it felt lighter than before, as if the ordinary walls had shifted, making room for possibility. She looked down at her sweater and jeans, realizing that for the first time that evening, her choice of clothing felt irrelevant, because the real weight she had felt, the fear of being unseen, the anxiety about appearances, was replaced by a subtle, lingering awareness that someone had truly noticed her, not for what she wore, but for who she was. Emma's mind replayed the encounter, the brief brush of hands, the warmth of Daniel's eyes, the easy rhythm of their conversation, and she found herself smiling quietly, wondering why a simple delivery had unsettled her so pleasantly, why a moment so ordinary carried the spark of something larger. She thought about how long it had been since someone made her feel this way, about the strange comfort of a stranger's kindness, and how quickly life could surprise her if she only let it in. The evening no longer felt heavy, instead, it held a new tension, a gentle curiosity that made her heart race and her thoughts wander, imagining how small gestures could lead to meaningful connections. Emma set the bag down on the counter, touched the edge where his fingers had lingered, and realized that the night had quietly shifted, that the ordinary act of opening a door had introduced her to a presence that would not leave easily, a presence that made her question the quiet boundaries she had placed around herself and wonder whether this encounter was the beginning of something she hadn't dared to hope for. The city outside continued its low hum, but inside, her apartment felt charged with a soft, unspoken promise, and Emma, standing alone once more, understood that this was more than a delivery, it was a gentle nudge toward vulnerability, toward noticing, toward the subtle thrill of being unexpectedly seen. She thought about Daniel walking away, each step measured and calm, yet leaving an echo that seemed to follow her into the living room, into the quiet corners where she had once felt alone, and she felt an unfamiliar, welcome warmth settle in her chest, a reminder that sometimes life's simplest encounters carried the deepest impact. Emma sat on her sofa, holding the pastry bag between her hands, replaying the conversation, noticing the sound of her own laughter, remembering how easily it had come, and she realized that this meeting, brief and accidental, had stirred something she had thought long buried, the readiness to let someone in, to feel lightness after weight, to embrace the unpredictable charm of life's quiet surprises. She thought about the evening ahead, the gathering she had almost dreaded, and smiled, recognizing that her night had already changed in ways she couldn't fully explain, and as she finally opened the bag to peek inside, she felt a new kind of anticipation, a gentle hope that perhaps, sometimes, when the world seemed ordinary, it could quietly open a door to moments that mattered far more than she ever imagined. A week had passed since that unexpected delivery, and Emma had tried to push the encounter with Daniel to the back of her mind, convincing herself it was just a coincidence, yet the memory of his calm smile, the brief touch of their fingers, and the ease with which he had made her feel noticed lingered in her thoughts, coloring the ordinary rhythm of her days with quiet curiosity. That afternoon, she wandered into the same cafe, hoping for a coffee to carry her through a busy workday, and was startled when she saw him again, standing near the counter, chatting casually with the barista, his laughter light and effortless, the same presence that had so unsettled yet comforted her before. When he saw her, his face brightened with recognition, and a warmth spread through her chest that surprised her. She had not expected to feel such an immediate connection with someone she barely knew. Daniel approached her with that familiar gentle smile, and this time, the conversation began naturally, without the polite distance of strangers, as if the week had been an unspoken rehearsal for this meeting. They spoke about the city, their favorite corners, and the odd little joys of life in a new place, yet each topic carried undercurrents of deeper understanding, shared experience, and mutual curiosity that neither had anticipated. Emma found herself laughing more freely than she had in months, her shoulders relaxing, her heart beating with a gentle rhythm that matched the hum of the cafe around them, and she realized that she wasn't thinking about appearances or small anxieties. She was simply enjoying the presence of someone who seemed to see her without expectation or judgment. Daniel shared small details about his own recent move from Vancouver, his life before the city, the slow adjustments of starting over, and Emma listened intently, noticing how he spoke with honesty and reflection, the kind of openness that made it easy to trust someone quickly. They discussed music, books, and art, their conversation flowing easily, punctuated with laughter, pauses, and the occasional thoughtful silence that felt comfortable rather than awkward, and Emma felt a warmth growing inside her that she hadn't experienced since the heartbreak that had brought her here. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long streaks of light across the tables, Daniel hesitated slightly before asking if she would like to continue their conversation over dinner sometime, his tone calm, without pressure, yet carrying a sincere interest that made her pulse quicken. Emma felt a familiar fear, the one that reminded her how easily things could be broken or misread, yet it was tempered by hope, quiet and steady, and she nodded, saying yes, her voice soft but certain, realizing that she wanted to see where this connection might lead. They left the cafe together, walking through the streets as evening fell, talking about small things, their steps matching in rhythm, the city around them fading into background as the shared space between them grew. Emma noticed the little gestures, the way Daniel adjusted his jacket, the subtle attentiveness in his gaze, the way he seemed to listen to her without distraction, responding to her thoughts with care and interest, and she felt a sense of being valued, of being understood, something she hadn't realized she had been craving. As the streetlights flickered on, the reflection of their conversation danced on the wet pavement from a recent drizzle, and Emma felt herself letting go of the lingering shadows of past disappointments, allowing the present moment, the quiet intensity of shared attention, to fill the space where doubt used to live. They laughed at small things, paused to notice details around them, and Emma realized that she was no longer self-conscious, no longer measuring her words or actions, but simply existing alongside someone who made her feel visible and alive. When they parted that evening, Daniel's goodbye was gentle, accompanied by a promise to meet again soon, and Emma walked back to her apartment with a lightness in her step that she hadn't felt in a long time, replaying the details of their encounter, the warmth of his presence, the easy rhythm of their conversation, and understanding that this connection, unexpected and unplanned, had stirred something deep within her. She sat by her window, watching the city lights shimmer, thinking about how a week had turned into an afternoon that might change everything, how coincidence had become opportunity, and how slowly, quietly, hope had begun to weave itself into her life again. In that moment, Emma understood that the story of who she was and who she might become was no longer defined by loss or hesitation, but by openness, by the willingness to embrace the small, ordinary moments that carried extraordinary meaning, and she realized with a soft thrill that what had started as a simple delivery might be the start of something beautiful, real, and profoundly unexpected, the kind of connection that made her heart lighter, her thoughts brighter, and her life suddenly full of quiet anticipation for the days to come. Weeks passed, and Emma and Daniel's connection grew steadily, effortlessly, as if life itself was giving them permission to explore something neither had expected but both quietly longed for, their dinners turning into long walks through the city streets, conversations stretching late into the night, filled with laughter, shared stories, and the kind of silence that felt comfortable, the kind that only happens when two people truly see each other. Daniel never rushed her, never asked for more than she was ready to give, and Emma realized that what she had been missing for so long was not excitement or drama, but a simple, genuine connection that allowed her to breathe, to feel safe, and to let her heart slowly open without fear. And as she looked back, she understood that the anxiety of feeling unseen, the pressure of appearances, and the constant self-questioning had been heavy burdens she no longer carried when she was with him. One evening, they found themselves standing by the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the calm water, casting streaks of gold and silver across the surface, and Emma felt a sudden impulse to speak something she had never voiced aloud, a truth she had kept locked away, a quiet confession about the night Daniel first came to her door. She had felt she had nothing to offer, nothing worth noticing, and yet here he was, weeks later, standing beside her, making her feel valued, cherished, and seen in ways that went beyond words or gestures. Daniel listened, his eyes steady and soft, and when she finished, he simply said, "You had everything, Emma. You just didn't see it yet." And in that moment, the weight she had carried for so long lifted, replaced by an emotion she could only describe as relief intertwined with hope, a recognition that life sometimes gives second chances not in loud declarations or dramatic moments, but in quiet, persistent ways that slowly reshape the heart. They talked about their fears, their past disappointments, and the lessons they had learned about life, love, and trust, each word drawing them closer, each laugh and each thoughtful pause building a foundation that felt solid, unshakable, yet tender, and Emma marveled at how simple presence, genuine attention, and shared vulnerability could create something so profoundly meaningful, something that felt both new and timeless. As they walked along the waterfront, hands brushing, shoulders occasionally touching, Emma realized that this was more than companionship. It was a partnership of understanding, a mutual care that grew without pressure, without rush, and without the shadows of past heartbreak. She remembered how that first night she had felt paralyzed by indecision and doubt, how she had stood before her closet feeling invisible and inadequate, and now she understood that the problem had never been about clothes or appearances, but about believing in her own worth, and Daniel's quiet presence had helped her see herself in a way she had forgotten she could. The city around them faded into a gentle background hum as they shared dreams for the future, hopes for small adventures, and the delight of discovering someone who could make ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Emma felt her chest swell with a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in a long time, joy, simple yet profound, tied not to grand gestures but to consistent, caring attention that made her feel fully herself. That night, they talked until the stars reflected in the water like scattered gems, their laughter echoing softly, their words carrying a gentle intimacy that didn't demand anything but allowed everything, and Emma realized that she was not afraid anymore, that she could trust in connection without losing herself, and that being with Daniel was not about needing someone to complete her but about sharing life with someone who truly understood her. As they paused to watch the lights shimmer on the waves, Emma felt a quiet